Good evening, everyone. We are Denis Codarini and Marco Sabbadini from Friuli Venezia Giulia. We are both umpires for A1 Series Softball. Today we will speak about when base runners run outside of the base paths. What does this depend on, and how do we respond as umpires? Let us start with the definition. Starting with Rule 2.2.2, the rule states that any official diamonds layout must include all features shown: foul lines, sidelines, 1 meter lines, etc. As stated in the Rulebook's Appendix 1.7, the 1 meter line is drawn parallel to and is 1 meter from the baseline, starting at a point halfway between home plate and first base, and continues all the way into first base. As stated in the Rule 5.1.2, the baseline is the direct line between a base and the runner's position at the time a defensive player is attempting or about to tag a runner. Let us continue speaking about the baseline at first base. There is a unique rule that is known as the double base. For any play with a live ball coming from the foul territory along the first base line, the baseline becomes doubled, which also extends into fair territory. This is illustrated in the image on your screen. Obviously, the distances are not accurate in this image, but it serves as a relevant example. In this type of play, both the batter runner and the defensive player may use either portion of the double base. If the defensive player chooses to use the portion of first base in foul ground, the batter runner can run in fair territory. If hit by a throw, this will not be declared interference, so long it was not done intentionally. As stated previously, the batter runner must run from the halfway point between home and first and onwards, within the double base line that is drawn on the field. If he does not do so, there would be cases where interference may be called. If the batter runner interferes with a defensive player who is throwing towards first base, or with the ball being thrown, as such, interfering with a player trying to make a play at first base, then interference will be called. The ball will be declared as dead, and base runners must return to their previously occupied base. Be careful here, because a ball that hits a batter runner is not always deemed interference. Things are a little simpler when speaking about the route to first base. The path to follow is actually drawn with lines on the field. In the first half of the distance to first base from home, the batter runner may in fact run within fair ground. This applies to both right and left-handed hitters who need some time to establish their route to first as they leave the box. But from the halfway point and onward, the batter runner must always move toward foul territory. On the first image, you can see the suggested route for a base runner towards first base. This second arrow is more similar to the actual path taken. With regard to the ball that comes from first base foul territory, a classic example is the drop third strike. In this case, as shown before, the baseline doubles. The base runner is to run through and touch the base in foul ground, which is designated in orange, while the defensive player uses the white base in fair territory to make their play. Ideally, the batter runner uses the opposite side that the defender is using. The most important reason for this is player safety. there is always a chance that a poor throw can pull the defensive player off of first base where the last second adjustment needs to be made. As soon as a batter runner arrives at first base, they become a base runner. Base runners are also held accountable to run within the base lines. However, this line is no longer drawn on the field. While running to any base in regular or reverse order, the base runner must not run more than 1 meter or 3 feet off of the base path to avoid being tagged, similar to the arm's length of a player. Of course, this rule takes into account that a base runner is looking to create the shortest distance necessary to arrive at the subsequent base, and the fact that a base runner may attempt to avoid a tag when a defending player has possession of the ball. Any base runner who leaves the allocated base path is out. The ball remains live and in play to allow the defending team to continue making outs. This applies to a base runner moving in either direction on the base paths, returning to touch a missed base or tagging up. It is not necessarily the case that simply leaving the base paths results in an out. A base runner may run behind or in front of a fielder outside the base path in an attempt to avoid interfering with a fielder who is in the process of fielding a batted ball on the base path. Another example is when a fielder directly on the base path or in the way of the base runner does not have possession of the ball. In these cases, leaving the base path is not an automatic out. We have stated that a base runner may stray from the base path in an attempt to avoid being tagged. Just as the base runners have their rights, as do the defending players on the field. Where are the zones that a defending player has this right away? This image on your screen illustrates this fact. These bubbles show the generally accepted realms where defenders can perform their defensive responsibilities. Keep in mind that this is theoretically speaking, and the game is dynamic and does not progress in such a black and white way. Other factors to consider are how many base runners are currently on base, which bases are occupied, the game situation, the likelihood of a stolen base, and the manager's decision for defensive alignment and shifts. This is not including pitchers and catchers who have a generally accepted more fixed position. This video is a theoretical example of the route a base runner should take starting from home and continuing all the way around the bases to score a run. In theory, without having to avoid any defensive players attempting to make a tag, the route is more or less straight all around the diamond. The 1 meter wide base path is symmetrical on both sides of the baselines. The base runner's route changes based on the type of batted ball. For example, an extra base hit would not have the base runner running the same route as would be the case in advancing one base. As such, implications are in effect as to the newly defined base paths. An extra base hit likely reaches the outfield, which would alter the positioning and movements made by the infielders. In this case, the route is not the same as the straight line seen in the previous video. The base runner will attempt to make the most efficient route to the next base as they get closer to their goal of scoring a run. The best route is the shortest one, and this impacts the base runner's movement from the onset. The best way to run the bases and make contact with each base is by using the right foot to touch the inside corner of each bag. Let us review all of the possibilities that may arise on the ball diamond when base runners and defensive players come into contact with one another. There are 4 principal situations. If everything is okay, then the defensive player has all the room necessary to make their play and the runner has enough clear space in front of them. If the defensive player gets in the way of the runner, there is obstruction. If the base runner gets in the way of the defender, there is interference. If instead everyone involved did everything right and there is a collision on the field, the situation must be analyzed to see what took place beforehand. Let us review the rulebook's guide for determining obstruction and/or interference in the case of convergence between a base runner and defender. Obstruction is the act made by a defensive player who impedes the progress of a batter runner or base runner who is legally running the bases. This is done while not in possession of the ball, not in the act of fielding a batted ball or in possession of the ball, but in the act of making a play on the base runner. Meanwhile, interference, as per the rulebook, takes place when an offensive player impedes, hinders, or confuses a defensive player attempting to make a play on a batted ball hit by the batter. After understanding the differences between interference and obstruction, we can proceed to review the 4 cases of collisions between a defensive player and a base runner. Imagine the play is right in front of you. There are 4 key elements here: the ball, the base to which the runner is advancing, the base runner, and the defensive player. Based on the different combinations of these 4 elements, we have 4 different situations. If the defender is on the base path that the runner is running on, while the ball is at a different part of the field and obviously not in possession of the defender, this is obstruction. No physical contact between the defender and the base runner is needed to make this call. If the defender has possession of the ball and the base runner is advancing towards the base where the defender is playing near, there is not obstruction on the part of the defender. The play proceeds as normal and the umpire makes the call as safe or out at the base. If the defending player is striving to gain possession of the ball, or has possession of the ball for some time, and the base runner is aware of this and makes an act to interfere with their ability to make a play that is within the defender's legally permitted realm of movement and action, there is likely interference to be called. Instead, when the defender is attempting to gain possession of the ball and the base runner is doing their part to advance to the next space, and both players arrive to this place on the field at the same time, no one has done wrong on their part. Play continues as normal. A classic example is when a defender at first base is preparing to receive a ball thrown from another defender, but a poor throw results in them having to leave the bag. The runner is doing their part to reach the base safely, and the first baseman is also doing her part to make a play and field a throw. There was no interference here, rather a simple case of being in the same place at the same time. In this last animation, we will see an example of when the ball and runner arrive at the same time at third base. Running towards third base and touching it safely requires a different approach from how first and second base were touched in this particular example. When approaching third base, knowing the ball is arriving from the outfield, the base runner must attempt to slide into the internal part of the base, that which being the furthest away from a potential tag from the third baseman. The base runner always maintains the objective of avoiding the tag. The scope of this presentation is not to discuss cases of interference and obstruction, but more importantly to consider these factors as we are examining the legal ways to run along the base paths. How can a runner do well to meet her objective of arriving safely at the subsequent base while respecting the 1 meter base path allowance and avoiding a tag? This photo shows this perfectly. The catcher is yet to tag the runner, who is leaving her arm in a position that is taggable. In order to make tagging harder for defensive players, the runner should strive to keep as much of her body away from the possible tag without being out of the base path. As in this picture, the majority of the base runner's body is out of reach. This yellow square shows the legally accepted 1 meter base path. The base runner's arm is still within reach, but not the majority of her body. This is known as a hook slide. This photo is an example of a runner who is off the baseline. The runner is clearly more than 1 meter from the allowed path and is illegally avoiding the catcher's tag. When rounding third to arrive safely at home, the base runner's path becomes less rounded and more straight. Here, we see the runner going around to touch home, which becomes much more difficult to do while remaining in the 1 meter base path. We also have a video to show an example of this. This example shows a base runner trying to score but also trying to avoid being tagged out. This is clearly off the bases despite being baseball rather than softball, which we are speaking about. We have spoken about and shown examples of when base runners attempt to avoid being tagged. There must be an understanding of the restraints placed on the runner who can avoid the tag legally. What about three-dimensional movements? The runner does not have to remain attached to the ground, as the ruling does not state there must be constant contact with the dirt while avoiding a tag. This can be done in the air, as seen in the images on your screen. Here's another video. In this case, the runner jumps right over the catcher, but does so legally as they are staying within the base path, and with a simple extension of the catcher's arm, a tag could have been made. This is legal and permitted within the rules of the game. Now let us watch an example from Game 3 of the finals of the Italian softball series. First, we will watch the video and then we will discuss what happened. Now we will see it frame by frame. The batted ball was hit to the shortstop, who throws home in an attempt to stop the runner on third base from scoring. This runner is now in a rundown as the catcher runs her back towards third base. After the catcher threw to third base, the base runner reroutes her direction towards home plate once again. The third picture shows that the third baseman was too far to be able to make a tag. The catcher makes room for the base runner and then applies a tag as they collide into each other. Let us see this from another angle. In the first picture, we see the third baseman receive the ball from the catcher. She is in a rundown and is tagged out by the catcher. The umpire, in their excellent view of the play, makes the ruling of obstruction. The manager of the team in blue, Saronno, stated that the base runner was off the baseline. The umpire, here with me in the studio, explains why this was declared obstruction and not the case of a base runner being off the base path. It is difficult to explain my reasoning here as I've had to make a very quick decision on this challenging play. However, this can be better understood as we review the frame-by-frame photos, as you can see from the third to fourth photos on your screen. Amanda Fama collides with the catcher while she has her feet in contact with the foul line. It is conceivable that a base runner who is 1.8 meters tall can be 1 meter away from the foul line with her body, and we also see that 1 foot is still on the line in her attempt to stay along the baseline. Let us see this from another angle again. The catcher was not trying to touch her with the glove in an attempt to make a tag, but was simply doing what was possible within the development of the play. The catcher is in the way of the base runner's legally accepted space, and with this collision, I declared obstruction based on how I saw the situation. Also, from this angle, you can see this play even clearer. In the moment in which Amanda Fama, the runner, collides with the catcher, Giulia Longhi, the other defensive player involved here, was very far from the runner and not able to reach her with a tag. As seen on your screen, the collision happened much earlier than the tag that followed. Thank you everyone for your attention and time today.